So please do open Zoom chat and respond to the question which is asked here. Okay.
सर जिन्होंने रिसर्च ही अभी तक ना की हो वो कौन सा डॉक्यूमेंट को मेंशन करें?
So all right. So you might be reading any document since.
ओके सर.
Hmm. So I'm presuming that most of the students from IOBM, they are working on education policies, homelessness in Pakistan, Prawn and Clark. What is this text about? Sharmeen, Ramesh, use of technologies in classroom. Okay. So you could be reading an article, you could be reading a book chapter, you might be reading a book. So just mention that here. Thematic analysis, all right. Okay. Creswell. So so you might see other participants' responses if you like. So just as it say, you need to react to at least two participants' responses. Maybe you can see there is a question or maybe thumbs up, maybe another emoji that you might want to post it there to ensure that you're also reading what others are typing. Okay. Working on traditional assessment to authentic assessment, systematic literature review. All right. Right. So I'm not going to go into. All right. Thank you very much. So I'm not going to start with the slides related to research methods, what they are, and some of the features or the characteristics of research method. I'm not going to do that. I'm quickly going to come to the main part of this, which is document analysis. So, document analysis, as the title says, we are analyzing a document. So, we are reading, we are trying to understand what that document is, what the text in the document, it could be words, it could be numbers, what that text is or the numbers are, and what does it say, what it doesn't say, what could be the hidden meaning of that. So all that is exercise that we do is actually we are trying to understand that document. So that is what we call document analysis. So document analysis, as remember, it's not Tom, Dick, and Harry's work. It is a systematic procedure for reviewing or evaluating documents. So the documents could be printed as those who might be researching maybe interviews or some document analysis when they are looking at maybe education policy or some other, or maybe textbooks. Then it could be printed, it could be electronic material. For example, a lot of people in in communication studies, they look at the posts in on different social media platforms. So that is also document, because there are words over there. And it is a way to elicit meaning by the researcher who is reading and trying to construct what is being said, what is not said, and they are trying to gain an understanding of what the writer of that text or the content has said, or what could it have been meant for that person, and to develop a kind of empirical knowledge, a scientific knowledge from that document, right? So mostly document analysis is used in qualitative method, mostly is, as I said, because sometimes document analysis also could be used in quantitative if we are looking at the frequencies of certain kind of words or phrases. So many times a certain word is used, how many times a certain phrase is used, or certain thing has been said, how many times someone has said, how many times someone did not say anything. So that could be quantitative as well. So we could, when we are looking at document, we can both look at quantitative and qualitative, but mostly, as I said earlier, mostly this document analysis is actually done in the qualitative methodology umbrella, right? And this is a very systematic and rigorous procedure. It takes time. We need to sit. It's a desk job. So we need to sit, we need to find resources, and then we need to, as I say, locate, review, and then interpret those documents, right? So I'm sure Dr. Fauziya has also lots of qualitative data. I have also lots of qualitative data when I was doing my PhD. So we have to sit, and it's a long hours work actually. And then it is interpretive, or what we call constructivist paradigm, or interpretivist paradigm, where we're trying to construct the meaning of the text that is being read and understood or evaluated or examined, right? It's versatile because it can stand alone, or it could be complemented by lots of other things. For example, if I look at my research experience, which is the qualitative, um, okay, I'm going to start my video so that you can see me. So if there is something happens, let me know that there is a problem with the communication, then I can turn off the video. So it's versatile, which means that I can look at, for example, if I recall my PhD thesis, I was looking only at the textbook content, right? So I was trying to interpret, I was trying to reconstruct the meaning from not only the text, but from the images also, right? So the text, so I used images also to reinforce or to complement my findings. And sometimes this I could have also used interviews, where I could have interviewed students, because there is plenty of research on what we call on citizenship education, civic education, where they have looked at the textbook content, and then they also interviewed students and teachers to find out whether what is there in the textbook is also happening in the lives of the students and the teachers. So it could be complemented by lots of other sources, interviews, observations, and surveys as well. So these are the types of documents. I'm sure many of you are familiar with these: primary documents, secondary documents, or what we call personal or informal documents also. So as you can say, primary sources are the original first-hand documents. It could be the education policy. It could be a government document. It could be, let's say, a novel written by an author. It could be a health policy document, or manuscript which might have been stored in the library. So if we are trying to find out, so that is what we call primary sources, or the primary documents. And this document has to be created at the time when this document was, for example, if you're looking at education policy, so there are multiple education policies. So we have to look at, if you're studying 2009 education policy, so we are going to look at 2009, because later we also come to another part of document analysis, which is contextualizing the document analysis also, right? So we're looking at a certain time period when the document was created. So we cannot say that in 2009 education policy, and we say that this was created because of this. So we have to look at what the document says and what was the reason or the rationale given for the document in that time or during that time, not what is being said right now. So that is the primary documents. Then curriculum frameworks, school reports, institutional records, university, school, colleges, and then minutes of the meetings, because event happened and then right after that minutes of the meetings were created. So it has to be signed. Minutes of the meeting has to be signed by all those who are part of the meeting. And you cannot wait for a year and then send the minutes of the meeting to those participants and get it signed from them. So it has to be within few days of the meeting. And student assessment files, which is the school record, official record created by teachers. So this is the original text, which hasn't been edited or modified or changed, right? So that is the primary documents. Then we have the secondary documents, and that could be newspaper and media articles, because these paper uses what we call information from other source. If it is, for example, report about a crime, so there might be asking question from those who might be looking or might be witnessing that particular crime or particular scene or accident scene. So that is the second hand information. So the first hand, if the writer, the news reporter was there, that is the first hand, the first or the primary document. But if the news reporter is writing report for the newspaper by collecting information from those who are present there, then that it becomes the secondary source of information or the secondary documents. Research reports and reviews, published textbooks, professional journals, think tank reports, and the inspection reports by different agencies. That is also because inspection reports are based on the records or the information provided by the school or by the organization, right? So that is reports by different organizations. They're also based on the secondary data collected from not the original, but the other groups. Then we have the third type of document is the personal or informal documents, such as diaries and reflective journals. It could be letters and correspondence, emails and social media posts, portfolios, teacher planning notes, and community newsletters. So that is the personal or the informal type of document that could be analyzed by the researchers. If you have any question, please do keep ask in the chat, and do raise hand so that I can open the chat and see the question or there as well. Otherwise, I may not be opening the chat. So quickly, the difference between the primary and the secondary source. The primary source is created at a time of event or shortly thereafter. It is a first-hand accounts and all, for example, photographs, letters, diaries, newspapers, right? And then secondary sources are created after the event has occurred, long time or maybe some time has passed, where events are recounted or recalled, and they again cite primary sources in that document. And then, for example, biographies, textbooks, encyclopedias, they are secondary sources of information. So the primary source, as you can say, the primary source and the secondary source and the tertiary sources, the nature is its original first-hand raw evidence. The secondary source is interpretation, analysis of the primary sources, and tertiary sources are the compilation or summary of the primary and the secondary sources. Timing of the creation of the document is primary is created at or near the time of event. It is created much later, and the tertiary is created even much later after the secondary source document has come into being or is created. Purpose in research, core data for analysis and meaning making, that is a purpose. So whenever we are trying to understand a policy, we always go back to the primary document, which is the education policy. Right. So in the secondary source, it is context, triangulation, or meta-analysis. We are trying, for example, if we look at a journal is trying to understand what kind of research is being sent to that particular journal. So then they are going to look at all the publications that have happened, and they are trying to see, okay, this kind of studies being sent, and these kinds of studies being accepted and published. So they can create a kind of report from these primary sources that were with them. So they might be triangulating whether the scope of the journal is known to those who are sending their publication or their articles, right? And then the tertiary is background or locating sources, examples from the education, because everyone is a student of education here. Policy documents, original reports, letters, student artifacts, then journal articles, critiquing policies, books on education history. Tertiary are the encyclopedias, bibliography, and review books or review handbooks. The strength of primary sources, it is direct and authentic insights. It provides direct and authentic insights. Secondary sources provides perspective and synthesis, because the secondary sources is already analyzing or derived from the primary sources, and they might have the writer of the secondary source might have used his or her perspective and made it part of the document. So it become a perspective of that. Then easy to access to overviews, that is for the tertiary. Then the challenges in for the primary sources, they may lack context, potential bias remissions, because this is created at a certain time. And when we are looking at primary source, when we are analyzing primary sources, we may not be able to find or identify the context within which the document was created, though it might provide. But for someone who is, for example, I'm evaluating 2009 education policy in 2026. So it is difficult for me to travel back to 2009 and see what could have been the factors or the forces that might have influenced the creation or that might have led to on this journey of creating a new education policy. So that is, so I might lack that if it is I'm trying to. So it is the context. So potential bias and omissions, I might miss those things. For the secondary sources, risk of author bias and interpretation. Right? So I'm looking at what others are writing about the primary source, about that event. So there is my personal bias also in it. Then it is further removed for the tertiary sources, since it was prepared much after the incident. So it might be oversimplification of what happened. It might ignore lots of things in that. Okay, so we are on to which is key techniques. As you can see, we will come to that. We'll look at these one by one also, what these are. So these are content analysis, network analysis, statistical analysis, visual, discourse, thematic, comparative, and contextual analysis. Most of the time, we actually either look at content analysis, we look at visual analysis, where we try to understand the pictures or the images. We go into discourse analysis, thematic analysis, comparative analysis, and contextual analysis, right? So let's look at them one by one, what these are. So content analysis, as you can see, it is content analysis. The purpose is to organize information into categories, which could be related to the research question that someone is researching and trying to find or exploring or trying to find answer. And through this content analysis, the student or the researcher is trying to identify and extract relevant passages, quotations, or excerpts, which is the short passages or the texts from the document. It can be, as I said, content analysis could be quantitative element if we look at the frequency of occurrence frequency of a certain maybe word or a certain phrase or a certain kind of image. If we're looking at that, then it could be used in both in the quantitative terms. So, but most of the time, for the education research, we usually go with the qualitative aspect. right? And then it is we need to structure. It is replicable insights. I'm someone who has read my research. When he or she is going to look at, for example, English textbook of 2008, and the person might be able to look at my research and might use the same theme analysis or the coding framework and might come to the same conclusion, right? So it is replicable. The insights could be replicable. And if it is frequency, then could also be. And then counting, so that is the frequency, how often equity or inclusion appear in national education policy. That could be one way of looking at the frequency. The thematic analysis. Okay, the next one is, so I'm just going to look at, just a second. So contextual analysis, it examines the circumstances surrounding a document creation, which is the people who were part of this exercise. For example, if you're going to look at 2009 education policy, one way of looking at it is looking at the document. The other way is look at maybe the minutes of the meeting. Maybe look at the people who were chosen to be part of that whole exercise. So what happened? Who was in the meeting? Who was not? Who was saying what, and who was listened to, who was not listened to. So who were listened to and who were not listened to. So that is contextual analysis as well. So we are trying to understand the significance of what was said, or in other words, what we call the power dynamics that could have been working in that particular group, right? So documents are influenced by historical, political, or institutional context also. So, since the people have they come with their own worldview, they come with their own ideology. So ideological differences could be influencing that also. So we're looking at that context so we can understand the document in that context also, right? For example, 2018 Punjab education policy in the light of political climate at that time. So what led to this? So the political climate could be the 18th Amendment, right? Or maybe the coming of a new government or something. So what led to the Punjab government's initiation of creating or initiating the 2018 education policy exercise? Comparative analysis is where we put together multiple documents to identify what we call similarities, differences, trends, and patterns. So this is usually happen in mostly we look at curriculum documents. We look at what knowledge is communicated, what skills are communicated, how that knowledge is communicated. Knowledge could be about country, about a certain group or ethnicity or anything. So that is. So for example, we may look at the curriculum document and the textbooks, whether the textbook is communicating the knowledge and the skills which is supposed to be communicated and mentioned in the curriculum document. So if it was there, then of course we are going to, it's a comparative analysis. We could do a comparative analysis of Indian Pakistani textbooks, so Indian Pakistan education policies also, right? So, or maybe Indian subcontinent education policies. And then we have thematic analysis. We identify, analyze, and reports recurring themes or motives within one or the across documents. So we are trying to find themes, right? So it could be, of course, when we looking at theme, then of course we get into an exercise where we try to develop a coding, what we call structure. Then we have the categories, then we have the themes, right? So there is a whole exercise that is followed when we use thematic analysis and we apply this on a certain document, right? And this is used to explore complex meanings and experiences, right? And then we have discourse analysis. Mostly this is used by maybe the English people who are researching writing, maybe literature, they usually look at the discourse analysis, where they try to understand how society is constructed, what is the social discourse, the social reality, the political reality, or the worldview, identity, ideologies, all sorts of things. That is discourse analysis, right? What is being said, which is rhetoric, and in that rhetoric, what is being said, what is unsaid. So all these, and which ideology is promoted through what is being said. So that is discourse analysis, right? And then we have visual analysis. This is the images. Um, what is there in the images? Um, for example, if we um, there are a lot of study which have looked at the what we call the way the role or the gender roles are reinforced in textbooks. So one way of reinforcing, okay, linguistics, right? I will look into that. So linguistics mean language, which could be literature, English, Urdu, all sorts of literature. Uh, For example, if we one way of looking at reinforcement of gender stereotypes is through the stories. There is father, there is mother, daughter is helping mother, father is, as we see what I have seen during my textbook analysis on gender, that father is sitting and reading newspaper, mother is working in the kitchen, daughter is helping in the kitchen, and the son is playing cricket outside. So that kind of the role were explained in the textbook. And if we look at the pictures, we could also look at the same picture, right? So that is another way of seeing how the gender role are um, sustained or communicated to the students, the female and the male students, right? So the visual analysis is another way of looking at. But sometimes visual analysis go beyond simple interpretation, right? There we try to find out hidden meanings of those images, right? What is it that they're trying to communicate, right? And then we have statistical analysis. It applies its quantitative aspect where we try to calculate frequencies, correlations, and trends, whereas we are studying different documents. So we try to create measurable data, right? And then we compare with, for example, if we are looking at environmental sustainability or sustainable living or sustainable societies, we're looking at Pakistani government document, and we might look at the Indian document, education policy document, and see how many times this particular phrase or environment and something with environment have been mentioned. So by looking at the frequencies, we could look at which document has given more importance to environment, which document hasn't given as much importance to environment as the other document has given. So that is statistical analysis of the document. The network analysis, this is also very interesting because we try to create all kinds of what we call arrows and signs where we're trying to find relationship of one thing with another thing. So we are trying to build relationships from the text or the information that is with us in that document. It could be between the themes, it could be between the actors or the characters in the story, it could be the social relationships which are mentioned there. It could be if the document is about, let's say, if it's I was reading it recently an article on local governance structures. So then they were trying to understand how the what we call so they had given a kind of network of network analysis of different countries, how the local governance, if they are properly what we call, what is the right word here in political science, when it is um, when the rights and the responsibilities are properly um, transmitted to the lower level, what changes or what changes does it bring into those communities and into those societies? And if the authority is kept at a center point, at a center place with within few individuals, how does it affect the development of that community or the society? So that was a kind of network analysis. Okay, so theoretical underpinnings of this document analysis, hermeneutics. So this is related to literature or linguist, right? So where they try to find out what is being said when some actor or some character is saying something, right? So what they are saying, what they do not speak for them. So that is the hermeneutics of that. We're trying to interpret meanings from those documents. And then we have social constructivism. Documents are social artifacts, so they are produced within institutional and cultural context, right? So it has to be, since they are created in a certain context, so we have to look at that context also when we are trying to socially construct that document or when we are trying to understand the document. So constructivism is also looking at the social constructivist aspect as well. Then we have critical theory, which looks at trying to understand who was writing the document, who has the authority, who did not have authority, whose voice was mentioned, whose voice was missing, all those things. So ideological assumptions that might have become part of the document. So that is all critical theory. And then we have post-culturalism, post-structuralism, and it says that documents are unstable and polysemous. Polysemous mean it has multiple meanings, right? A word, for example, a word has multiple meaning. For example, star. Now, star has multiple meaning. Can you give me the meanings of the word star here? What does a star mean? Let's say. Now, put it in the
A
chat.
star could be a celestial body, like
Okay.
celestial body.
Okay.
That is on the
Celebrity,
sky,
that's right.
and it could be a celebrity.
Right. So it has, so the
A
one
known
word,
person.
yes, yes. So it has different meanings. So that is, that's what this word means, right? The other word is, so it's different from homonym, right? So shifts across time, context, and reader, right? So documents should be read against the grain. So if you look at read against the grain, again, grain means something related to wheat and rice and all sorts of things. But when we are looking at, it has a certain perspective of this phrase. So that is the post-structuralism. So the process, and after the process, I will be giving you an exercise to do, and I will give you time to work on that exercise. So this has 6. The first one is locate and select document, right? So you need to identify where the document could be found, what kind of document that is. So as you can see, define your document, what that document is, and how it is related to your research question or your research. And of course, we use purposive sampling because you are looking at that particular document and you need the document for your research. And also, and not all documents could be considered for this particular study. The sources of these documents could be or should be institutional archives, government portals, libraries, databases, or internet, right? And then we need to authenticate and verify the document. We need to confirm that the document is genuine. We need to check and prove its authorship also. If it is a government of Pakistan, then it has to be, we need to check that this is really the authorship, right? So we need to check who the author of the document is. Then we need to assess its completeness, that the document that I'm going to view, it is complete from page 1 to the last page. None of the pages or the page is or the are missing. And any revision, if there are any, for example, if policy has revision 1, revision 2, then we also need to look at that also, and it should become part of that as well. We need to cross-check with other sources. If we are not sure about the authenticity of the document, we cannot verify, then of course we can look at some other sources as to verify its authenticity. Number 3 is assess suitability and relevance. We can apply CRAP test, which is currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose. So and that is the CRAP test. We will look at it also. And then, does the document directly address your research question? Consider the original purpose of the document. Document your inclusion or exclusion criteria explicitly, right? So you might be looking at certain part of the document and what is the criterion or criteria to choose that part of the document, and not to look at other chapters or the other pages of the documents. There has to be, you need to state it in your thesis or in your article if you're writing an article. Then initial reading, which is skimming and scanning. We quickly skim and scan. We try to understand the structure, headings, headers, subheadings, all that thing. Then we try to see if there are, then we start reading and we try to highlight themes, patterns, anomalies. If we have, these days, we do not have hard document in hard copy. We always have soft copies, which is on the laptop. So but each document have a certain, for example, Adobe has a feature where you can write notes, right? So we can start taking, or we can start annotating the document. Earlier, we used to do it with pen or highlighting. Now all those features available in the in Adobe or some other PDF readers also, or the Word document if it's a Word doc. Then we need to identify, so write brief marginal notes, which is annotating the document. Identify the rhetorical style, audience, and key arguments. So we always write how it is said, for whom it is said, and what is being said. So that is what we write in the annotation that we are doing in the document as we are reading the document. Then the fifth part is, or the fifth stage is systematic analysis. We apply, it is up to us to think of the strategy that we want to use. I already explained to you methods that we could use when we are analyzing a document, or when we are using document as a source of, as a research data. So, so we need to choose the appropriate research method. So then we have to, if it is content analysis, whether it is thematic analysis, whether it is course analysis, right, or network analysis or some other, then we need to develop coding categories, right? This could be, we could use inductive method of code to do this, or deductive method, right? And then if it is what we call the frequencies, then we can look at the frequencies, or if it is the context, then we can look at the context also. And then we also look at the absence of key themes. If the certain key themes are part of our research question or the coding theme, but in the data that might not be there, right? And then we can use any software, computer assisted program, NVivo, Atlas, or we could do manual coding also, right? Then the last part of is the interpretation and synthesis. So moving beyond description. So when we say interpretation, we are not describing this is being said, that we are trying to construct meaning for ourselves. So the research is constructing meaning, and the meaning is rooted in a certain theoretical foundation, which is part of the which is the foundation of the research thesis, or the thesis or the research that the researcher is executing, right? So what do the patterns mean? Connect findings to your theoretical framework and research questions. So triangulate with other data sources if we have other data sources. If it is a text only, then that's fine. If we are collecting data along with text, interviews and observations, questionnaire, then we have to triangulate that also. Then acknowledge competing interpretation if there is, right? And reflexivity is essential. Reflexivity means personal reflection. So these are the some of the, as I explained earlier in the slides, the methods that we use: content analysis, thematic analysis, discourse analysis, and so the only new one is narrative analysis. I think everyone is familiar with narrative analysis because in Pakistani context, that is what everyone is talking about: narrative, 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 right? So so we are looking at the stories and how those stories are structured, who are the characters, which character has more space, which person or the character has little space. All that is part of narrative analysis. Diaries, letters are for that. So strength and the limitation. First, look at the strengths. So the strength of document analysis is we are dealing with non-reactive data because the document exists independently of the researcher. I don't have any control of what is in the document or what could have gone into the document. So that is non-reactive data. So there is no bias on the researcher part, right? It's cost efficient. We don't need to spend money to go out in the field and collect data. It is there. We just need to either go to the library or sit at a computer desk and collect information and start reading it. And then it is rich contextual details such as policy documents, reports, and records. It captures institutional context and official discourses. It is rich in details. Historical depth. So access to longitudinal data and historical record that cannot be obtained through live data collections. That is also aspect of the strength of document analysis. Then triangulation also is the strength of this because we try to triangulate data that we could collect from different sources, right? And we're trying to fill in the gaps that we could have identified in the document, but that gap could be bridged or could be filled in by collecting data from another source, which could be interviews, right? Corroborating or challenging findings from interviews or surveys. So broad coverage, a single researcher can analyze large volumes of text spanning multiple institutions or time periods. So that is also what we call strength of that. So the next is limitations. As we could see, it is incomplete or biased records because the documents are produced with specific purposes. So important information may be omitted, redacted, or destroyed. Redacted mean, you might have seen these days, some of the document have text, but the text is blackened. So they want the readers not to read that information, which is blackened. So that is what we call redacted information, right? Or that the document might be distorted. So that is incomplete or biased records. Then lack of context. So documents rarely explain themselves. So the researcher is trying to create to construct the context of the document. So without contextual knowledge, meaning can be misread or oversimplified. Risk of anachronism. Applying contemporary interpretive frameworks to historical documents can produce misleading readings. So that is another one. Access and gatekeeping. Institutional documents may be restricted. Researchers must navigate confidentiality, copyright, and ethical permissions. Now, that is also an interesting thing because when I look at the textbooks or the education policies, we always find that document available to us. So that is open access document. But there are certain documents which are not available to the general audience. They might be stored in the archives. So you have to get permissions to get access to those archives. So someone is gatekeeping, someone is what we call safeguarding or what we call chowkidar of those documents, right? We need permissions related to confidentiality, copyright, and ethical permissions. Then authenticity concern is another challenge. Documents may be forged, amended, or misrepresented. So we must need to establish their authenticity. That was also one of the steps that I mentioned a while ago. Then researcher, my subjectivity or the researcher's subjectivity is another limitation, because each one is approaching a certain text with one's experiences, with one's worldview. So it might affect the creation of the code, the theme, or an interpretation of the code when someone is trying to generate themes. So researcher subjectivity is also limitation, though a while ago, as I said, that the document analysis could be replicable. If I have seen a document and I have reached at a certain conclusion, someone sitting at other part of the world should also be coming to the same conclusion if we use the same coding framework. So there is, but sometimes may not be, because the person here I might be looking at, I may have my own subjective worldview, and the other researcher in that part of the world may have his or her own worldview. So ethical considerations, we need to get, if it is document which might be property of a certain institute or a certain individual or a group, then we have to get their consent to access the document, and then to their permission to report findings from that document, right? And that is why, if you remember that if you have those who might be working on developing a research proposal, so if you are going to use interviews, so when you are preparing your consent letter, right, or informed consent letter, so you will be putting a sentence over there that information from the interviews will be shared with the participants before this is reported in the thesis or in the article. Yeah, so this is required. This is part of ethical research. Anonymity and confidentiality is also important. So we don't have to mention if there are people in a certain document, if there are people who are part of a certain contextual analysis of the document, we don't mention those names. We try it. We anonymize those when we referring to a certain individual by ensuring that every individual's is actually remain unknown to the readers. So it happens in the interviews as well. We assign codes to the interviewees. We don't mention them with the names, right? If we are mentioning names, then of course we might be giving them what we call pseudonym. Representation and fairness, avoid selective quotations from that might misrepresent the document's overall message. That is also possible because it depends on my worldview, the way I look at the document. If I'm trying to find problems, then I am going to find text that might represent problem. But if I'm not trying to problem and I'm trying to find strengths, but I'm finding codes that might be interpreted as problem, then that is not a fair representation of the document. So we need to ensure that the findings are reported, they are fair, and they as were thought by the original authors of the document. Reflexivity and positionality. Everyone, for example, if you have, I'm sure Dr. Fauziya must have done this one. We always mention in the research methodology chapter that the reflexivity and positionality of the researcher, where we do explain what is my position in terms of this kind of research, right? My orientation, background, whether it is ethnic, religious, political, whatever. So we try to explain to the readers the positionality of the author as well. Right. So I think I've been talking for about 40 minutes. So is there any question before I give you the task? Let me see if I can share a document here. How to share a document? Can I share a document in the chat? Okay, there is I found it.
Yes, sir.
I have found it. I'm using it after a long time, so. So you can see the first document that I've shared is the uh, practicing exercise. Just this is a Word document. You can open it on your desktop or laptop, or if you're using phone, that's fine. And the other document is the text that we are going to use for this exercise. So I'm sure everyone must have opened this. I'm also going to share that document now. You stop sharing this, and I will share with you the document. Have you opened the document?
Yes, sir.
Tell me more. Okay, so I'm sure you can see the document here also. So as you can see, we are going to do this exercise, and we shouldn't be spending more than 10 minutes on that. It's 6:38, so I'm sure we will be able to finish it by 6:48 or 6:50, let's say. So I have already shared with you the text also. It's a one-page text from the Government of Pakistan's education policy document. So let's see if you can, as you answer questions in part one, Sorry, I have shared the wrong document. Sorry, I'm just going to share the correct one. Just a second. Chat. No, that's right. That's ठीक. The document is correct. See, exercised. I opened the wrong document. So this document has okay. So this was the document. That is the task. So you can see the research questions. I just put few research questions. So the first section is who produced this document and for what audience. So just respond to these questions. So let me know if you are working on the document, because I will start putting completing the information also here for you to see as well. Small. I need to unmute myself. So I did section 1. So if your responses are similar to what I wrote here, then it means you are on track to learn or to do document analysis on your own. Let's see. Just mention how many of you have almost similar responses as mine. Right. So let's go to the next one, which is B, which is asking you to, since it's one page, there are only two subsections of that. So let's see if you can identify certain themes and sub-themes from from this page through skimming and scanning. What themes could you extract? Let's see. So I'm just trying to do this part quickly because it's already time, so we don't have a lot of time for that. So I'm just going to do that for you. So um, so as you could see here, I've just done this. So this is, so when we are looking at, we are trying to work on a certain document, we need to, so this exercise will help you to initially start working on the document and maybe to get to become familiar with the document, right? So I'm just going to stop sharing the screen and we'll come back to the PowerPoint. So, so if we conclude this session today, so these are some of the key takeaways from today's session. The first one is document analysis is a systematic process, though it is interpretive, and most it is used in qualitative research methods. Documents exist as a social artifacts always. So the researcher should always ask who made this document, for whom this document was made, and why. Right? Why was it made? What purpose could have this document could have served at that time? So it's a rigorous process. So which is composed or consists of locating document, authenticating the document, and then we need to assess how it is related to my research. We need read, then we skim, scan, analyze, and interpret the text. And then we can choose our analytical approach when we are interpreting data, when we are analyzing data, whether we go with content analysis, thematic analysis, or discourse analysis, right? And it is usually decided by our research questions and theoretical framework of our research document, research proposal. We need to acknowledge limitations, the biases, access, context, and our own positionality, which is reflexivity. This is also part of the findings and the research methodology section of the thesis. Then we also need to follow ethical processes that require when it comes to access document, when it comes to reporting document, when it comes to reporting parts of the document or the text of the document. So we need to ensure that if there are individuals, their names are there, then the names are not mentioned. We need to keep that confidential, right? And it has to be fair representation of the document. So these are the key takeaways from this session. So is there any question